Dobrodošli. Welcome to the second session of a live Facebook training on the European Training Academy. It's Master in the EU Funds and Project Leadership Training, and we'll be broadcasting live over Facebook, and as well you can possibly then replay and review this with eutraining.info and eufunds.info. I'm going to spend another few minutes to share this broadcast with the European Training Academy and other websites. Anyway, I don't know how much it's visible and readable for you what's on the big screen. So I'm going to, here it is. Page down. Good. Okay. I'm going to start with the project objectives. So this training is an interactive journey through the lifespan of European projects, covering the whole range from the idea to the implementation follow-up. Now, for those of you who are beginners, we shall provide an overview of funding sources, then assist you to identify the most adequate funding source for your idea and your interests, elaborate a little bit those key variables for success of your proposals, as well how to identify the most suitable partners, and pretty much will focus to show you how to take part in EU programs. Now, for those of you who are more advanced, who had been writing proposals before or implementing them, we'll be focusing to advance your skill set in terms of project design, proposal writing, management, and how to maximize the usage of EU funding and the reach and impact of your projects. So we shall elaborate what it means in both cases, what it means excellence in project design and proposal writing. Throughout the years, as I've been working as a trainer and expert in this area, I have encountered a variety of different questions, and I've trained pretty much, well, I stopped counting, but more than 10,000 people with quite high evaluations and so on. So I've grouped their questions, and these questions shall be the pillars for sessions in this training. And as I said in day one, we have been discussing a little bit on how EU works. So why do you receive EU grants? Why is EU willing to give you money to spend on your own purposes and objectives and so on? And then today we're supposed to focus more on EU programs so that you can have a clear overview of all the funding instruments, and by the end of this session, supposedly, you can choose the right program for you and you can choose the right call. Anyway, so program is grouped around these questions. I'm not sure whether you could possibly read everything on the screen. We might possibly maybe try to zoom a little bit and figure out, you see, the first part of the training is focusing on how to identify the adequate funding source for your idea. And once you've identified the adequate funding source, then we shall inevitably, those who have they've encountered this overload of information which is published on EU portals, on program portals, and so on and so on. So what we'll try to do is we'll help you identify those parts of the text in web pages and work programs and calls which is relevant for you to decide whether this is the right call for you. So we'll focus on call analysis and decisions about your role, whether you'd like to be a partner or you are going to be the consortium leader and the one who leads the design and proposal writing as well. Then also, once you've identified the program and once you have a clear idea, it's likely that you are not the first person who had came to an idea to do something in that area. We can zoom out a little bit as well. You can freely come back to focus on me as well. So it's likely that there are other people and other organizations who have been successful already in tackling issues such as, I don't know, disability or climate changes, research and innovation in a variety of different areas. Might be agriculture, might be health, might be entrepreneurship, well, whatever. So it would be crucial for you to know who are the stakeholders, who are those people and organizations who have power and influence that may affect the outcome of your own initiatives. Those who could decide whether you'll be successful or not. So it's necessary for you to do a bit of a stakeholder analysis and map out those with power and interest, and as well map out the best and the most suitable partners for your projects who would match and complement your expertise and capacities and resources and whatever else is necessary for you to achieve the results that you plan to have. So we'll be discussing how to identify the best partners and create a consortium. Now, as I've been doing this for a long time, I won't be quoting what's written in new websites or any guidebooks and so on. I'll be pretty much sharing with you the most effective tools that I implement on a daily basis as a proposal writer and as an expert and as a consultant of a variety of different organizations ranging from governments like Serbian government, like Turkish government, like the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ukraine and other countries, then large organizations and small and large enterprises, research and development organizations, technoparks, innovation centers, academia. So I'll be focusing on things that I'm doing on a daily basis in order to make my clients successful. And I'll be sharing this practical expertise with you. Now, that would inevitably differ significantly from, of course, what you'll find published in EU web pages and so on and so on. So I'll put much more light on those key variables for success. Now, apart from the people side of project design and development, there is this technical side that you continuously emphasize because EU is pretty much controlling you through its own bureaucracy and administrative procedures and administration. Because fundamentally EU is an administrative and bureaucratic organization. So on the technical side, I'll be focusing on key evaluation criteria for the design and proposal writing. So how you can get the maximum score in each section and as well how you must expand the base of power and influence on those who are deciding who gets the money and which proposals shall be funded. Then, closer to the end of the program, we'll be dealing with effective communication tools, cross-cultural negotiations, then effective teamwork, and using conflicts as resources, as well as typical, most common political games in projects. We, particularly in the Balkans, but increasingly in all other parts of Europe, we have prevailing dominant role of politics, regardless of the area of the project, regardless of your network experience and so on. We can't ignore the elephant in a room, so you do need to know how to survive the political games. Otherwise you're risking to lose your position, and you are risking fundamentally to be marginalized or personally attacked or discredited and manipulated and so on, which are the usual political games in the project. As well then, once you can grasp all the strategies and tactics or for the stakeholders, fundamentally each project deals with leading changes, and one of the typical conclusions that I have found in conversation with my senior colleagues is that as long as we have EU grants and as long as we have EU money, there's some increase in activities, and there are some benefits for those who are, for example, experts hired to do the work, or some of the beneficiaries. But as soon as the money has stopped flowing, it happens that we don't have any impact, and nothing had changed by the end of the project. Funny, but regretful or funny, depending on from your own position, that what you'll find is that tremendous amount of money is wasted. So we'll be discussing how to create and lead sustainable changes, which down to the core means how do you effectively change behavior of people or groups, culture. So how to survive while you are exercising leadership, which is one of my favorite topics that I had spent pretty much all of my life researching and working with in practice. When I say I spent all of my life, by now I'm 41, and I have something around 20 years of experience in this EU funding arena, and out of this 20 years of experience since I started writing proposals, 15 is kind of formally recognized as being as having the role of either project officer when I started, and then an expert, then a key expert, and so on and so on, trainer in a variety of different circumstances. So, as much as I've explained, we'll be trying to move you away outside from your comfort zone into a place where you effectively are facing the unknown, and we call that a challenge zone. So I need to decrease the volume in order to reduce the echo effect. So I'll be raising questions that probably for which you don't have the answer, and as well probably neither do I or my colleagues. But what we do know is the set of steps, and what we do have is a set of tools which will lead you to finding the right answers while you are tackling challenges in this path of developing EU project proposals. Very briefly now again, I'll introduce myself in just a few words. For those of you who are new, I see that we have quite a few people who are joining, and welcome and greetings to all of you from all around the world. I hope that you don't mind that this session will be fully in English language. The next one will be devoted to the Balkan countries, so we're going to translate a little bit. But anyway, you can raise questions in any language if you like. So feel free just to type in your question and I'm going to address it, whether it's in English or whether it's in any of the languages that I'm familiar with, which would be French, all the XU languages and so on and so on. Now, I graduated as a Bachelor of Business Administration a long time ago in Paris, in France, in 1999. Then I had done my Masters in Brussels at the Solvay, Brussels School of Economics, Solvay Business School. I spent there later on in Brussels some 6-7 years, 8. I completed my executive education at Harvard University. I've been writing proposals and implementing EU-funded projects for more than 20 years. In the meanwhile, I've been a manager of EU Access, which was a Brussels-based consultancy. At the time, it was the first consultancy created focused on the Western Balkans to maximize the usage of EU funding and participation of the Balkan countries in EU programs. I had also later on been leading as one of the founders as well of the Balkan Security Network. And for the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years or more, I've been one of the senior experts at the European Training Academy and been developing the European Training Academy in Croatia, in Turkey. I've started a little bit working with my colleagues in Ukraine as well on developing ETA there and in Montenegro with great pleasure. So pretty much I have experience in all the programs that had existed from the time of CARDS, FAR, FP6 I think, then FP7, and now Horizon, IPA, and so on. That much about me. So let's start from the very beginning, understanding of the EU. And there are these increasingly vivid and also challenging debates, conflicting in many ways about what is the EU and what it shall be. So if you focus on what it is, it's a unique economic and political partnership of right now 28 diverse democracies united in their commitment to peace, to democracy, to the rule of law and respect of human rights. So those are the core values, the pillars on which the EU had been brought upon. Now it's turned that I won't go to details about how we got to where we are right now, from the treaty, the European Coal and Steel Community in 1952, down to the Treaty of Amsterdam and Treaty of Nice and Treaty of Lisbon and so on. I'm happy to share with you videos and links and so on where you can find more information for those of you who are interested in the EU as it is. However, I'll just very briefly tackle on kind of standards of policy making system outlined in the treaties. We have the Commission, the European Commission, that proposes policy. Then we have Parliament advising, restricting on range of matters and refining these policies. We have the Council that decides, and we have the Court, of course, in its own rules. So you have descriptions of each one of the institutions. Well, these are not all the institutions of the European Union, but the most important ones are presented here in the slide. And you can as well see how the process of decision making in terms of the policies, in terms of the budget and programs and so on, how it works. But what might be critically important for you to know is this slide. It's an interesting one. This slide is, you don't even need to zoom this slide. And I do owe the privilege of having this slide. It has been sent to me by a colleague of mine. So thanks to Mita, and he had created this, which is very relevant for you just understand on how many influencers you have around these institutions. So it's not that the Commission decides on everything. You have quite a lot of expert groups around. You have coalitions. You have industry making significant impact on the Commission's decisions. Then you have, in terms of the Parliament, significant role again of the industry and those who are, let's say, friends, but again, lobbying and civil society. In terms of the Council, you have those co-reppers, you have bureaucracy, you have a lot of diplomacy behind it and so on. So it's a highly complex system. And I'm going to summarize it to make it very simple for you to understand. By using this triangle, everything within the EU funding arena happens within a triangle between politicians, and then politicians would discuss, debate, argue, negotiate, fight, get in conflicts about their own interests, because each one of them and each political group would want to advance their own interests. And as in any other area of life, you'd find them fiercely being committed to advance their own agenda, focused on their own interests. But yet here we have 28 countries still. I don't know when Brexit and how it's going to unwind, or whether we're going to have new enlargements. Anyway, at the moment, so you have an incredibly wide diversity of different interest groups with their own industry, with their own security, with their own financial issues and so on, struggling about how they can work together. And once they agree on what they want to do together and how they want to do it, then they create policies and strategies. So those are documents which are in terms of how strict they can be and how complex the process is for the EU to develop and design its policies and strategies and so on. Those are similar to regulations and so on. It's difficult for them to be changed. And then you have this part of the triangle, which is European Commission, which is the executive arm of the whole system. So European Commission is there to implement what the politicians have created and framed into policies and strategies and so on. And the European Commission usually have two choices to make an obligatory instruments such as regulations. For example, if you want to export to the EU, you would need to have CE marking, and then it's upon you on how you get it. And the other part, those are funding programs. So see here, you have European Commission that focuses on the means, tools, how they are going to achieve the objectives decided upon by the politicians, and then they create funding programs. And this is very important for you to understand, because we, those who are proposing projects and those who are implementing them and who like to get money, it's expected by the European Commission that we design proposals that will assist to successfully implement EU policies defined by the politicians and then phrased and refined by the Commission. And initial quality of your ideas we can typically measure by how much impact you're going to have. So if this is the starting point in your proposal, if this is the state of the affairs right now, as an expert and as a consultant and so on, the way for me to decide whether your idea can mobilize some funds and whether you can get resources is by measuring how much impact can you have to move the situation from here up to where the objectives are and they're successfully implemented. In a nutshell, so EU spends public money to undertake the project that will benefit EU economy and address social problems that are important for the EU. And there's a lot of marketing and there's a lot of publicity how EU is actually focused on youth, on unemployed, on this and that, on whomever. And I have met so many people and worked with so many people who say, well, this is not true, because they didn't get the money. They want to, and so on, but they don't have a sufficient amount of information, language skills, understanding how the system works, and so on. So it's not that the EU wishes to help everyone. The EU wishes to address the issues which are important for the EU. So by working on EU funding programs, you're essentially working to contribute the EU achieve its own objectives. That's very relevant for you to understand that. Now the treaties, of course, are where the member states, they come together and prepare documents and describe the policy areas where they wish to cooperate, and then the policy is based on these agreements and treaties, and they describe exactly how member states will work together to meet those objectives. And then you have legislations as those obligatory instruments, and then you have funding programs which are designed as instruments to implement EU policies. And we have many different programs. Now, because we have such a huge diversity in terms of programs and in terms of ways how you get the money, the last setup, the Juncker's team, had focused on these priorities, and most likely we are going to see significant changes, because right now we're facing election in the EU. But here, for example, you can see that priorities were an investment plan, an ambitious one, where we want to boost new jobs and growth in investments, and then a concrete digital single market. And then, for example, when you take a look, because this is a priority and it reflects down through everything that the EU does. If you take a look, for example, in Serbia, or in Macedonia, or in regions where the EU is neighboring countries or candidate countries, where the EU is focusing on some areas, you see that they are really focusing on those priorities. So you see that they're really heavily investing in this. Probably not because of the benefit of the country, but because of the benefit of the EU, as I stated. And then you have a resilient energy union with the forward-looking climate change, resilience to climate changes. And we have quite a few countries in the EU that have already shifted fully to renewable energy sources. And yet we have an incredible amount of difficulties in some other countries where the EU is slowing down this process and not enabling countries to develop their independent sources for the renewable energy, actually manipulating and dominating the market. So you see, there are as well these interests within the EU of some countries who are kind of more influential in protecting their own interests and benefiting, and some countries which are less skillful to advance and project and implement their own interests. Anyway, new policy on migration. Now we have a breakdown of EU security policy in that regard on migration in Bosnia, in Macedonia, here in Serbia. Europe as a stronger global actor, which was one of the priorities. And at the moment, what we see is that we have EU kind of in a triangle, in a dispute between. There's almost a trade war with the US. There's a increase in relationship with Russia, of course, which is natural and ought to be advanced, and so on. Now, in terms of democratic change, and in terms of preserving and advancing the democracy and the rule of law, you had seen and witnessed the complete breakdown of those fundamental values in the EU. You have EU supporting right now dictatorial authoritarian regimes and implementing direct colonization in a way of the countries. So they're contributing corruption and wrongdoing. So you have a breakdown of some of the policies, and that would include security policy as well, particularly in the Balkans. Anyway, so about the future of the EU, these are the scenarios which were planned within the EU think tanks, Brussels-based think tanks, where we had these several options to presented to us to choose among and choose between. But in any scenario planning, such as the one that we had in 2003, way before this one was published, it proved that what was presented was all wrong. None of the presented scenarios had unwind, and we had complete different situation during Juncker's mandate. So, but just to clue you in a little bit about what the EU had focused on, here you can see the scenario of carrying on. So saying we're going to carry on as it was before. Then, meaning essentially we're going to just keep doing what we're doing, because it's a huge system that employs quite a lot of people, many are benefiting. Then you have nothing but the single market scenario. Then you have a scenario, those who want more, they do more. So we have this double track between the countries that benefit and those who don't. And then you have doing less, more efficiently, meaning we're going to focus on those key issues which are important for us. And then doing much more together, which would be some kind of a previous scenario, the EU Renaissance, and so on and so on. As well, you have implications on the single trade market, single market and trade and monetary union, and security and defense and EU budget and so on and so on, as drivers of changes. But yet, I won't jump into conclusions of what the new European elections are going to bring us. From what I have seen so far, I'm not an optimist in terms of the increase of the situation where we have increased democracy and rule of law. Why? Because more and more what we see is that the EU is fundamentally serving the objectives of the financial elite, global financial elite. So as you can see, in terms of accumulating wealth and resources, you'd find that EU is fundamentally extracting the resources, wealth, labor, and so on and so on, wherever it might and wherever it can do. And you see that it's enforcing increasingly domination and control. So more and more what I have found is that there are increasing similarities between USA foreign policy in the way how it is implemented and EU foreign policy, because I had never seen in 15 years ago that EU had been neglecting to such an extent as today the fundamental rule of law, justice, democratic procedures, and so on and so on. So we have a complete breakdown in terms of, well, not a breakdown, we have a different path that EU had taken from what it was the initial vision of the EU. So we don't know where it's going to lead, we don't know what's going to happen, where EU is going to go next. It might be a stronger union on one side, but it might as well kind of dissolve in more flexible and more of a loose coalition partnership of some states. Now, in terms of these political issues and in terms of the future, it will directly affect us as those who are within the candidate countries and within new member states, and in Eastern Europe particularly, and those who are working with the EU in the neighboring regions. So, for example, the future and the policies there will strongly affect Ukraine, will strongly affect Turkey and and so on and so on. Not to mention the entire Balkans, which is kind of boiling at the moment. But I won't go deeper into the political issues. I'm going to now focus back on money. In order for you to figure out whether you can finance your idea and whether you can get the money, the first place to look at is the EU budget. So you can see that the EU budget here for the 2017 was something like 158 billion, and you can see that it was divided in several areas. So you can see that, for example, security and citizenship and justice, they were 3% of that amount. And then you have Global Europe group of programs, instruments, that was around 6%. And Global Europe would be a set of instruments for projecting European interests throughout the globe, so making EU more of a stronger global actor. And then you have other administration issues. Then you have smart and inclusive growth. Now this is a very significant portion of the budget, it's 48%, almost half of it, went to job competitiveness and regional development. And then you have sustainable growth, with a little bit less, 57%, devoted to natural resources and agriculture and environment. And this is how it looks. Now, whenever I present this slide, people on trainings, they start kind of just trying to pick up everything which is written here, and it's impossible. First, it's create a slide is created in such a way so you definitely can't read all of the programs that you have available. But the point of this slide is just to present you the range of instruments that you have available. So I'm going to present most of them in a slightly different manner, so you have a basic orientation. What are those instruments that might be of interest to you? So first, among the competitiveness for growth in jobs. Let's see whether we can go right. Okay, so here it is. Competitiveness for growth in jobs. This is a range of instruments here that includes European Satellite Navigation System. Now, you probably are not going to benefit from it, except perhaps you might be paying some fees for its maintenance and using it. Then you have Horizon 2020, and this is by far the largest and the most attractive EU funding program, the most popular as well, but financially it's almost 80 billion euros. So when you take a look in the global picture of all the funding schemes, this is the largest open grant scheme on the planet, with currently the largest number of applicants, and as well very tight and fierce competition and very, how should I put it, low success rates, meaning that for some of the programs, sub-programs, there would be only 5%, for example, success rate. Out of 100 applications, it means that 5 would be financed. Now, some may say that this is not fair, and I fully agree with you. The reason why the EU had created this in such a way, they justify it by competitiveness that will create new and added value and quality. But essentially that's marketing and that's propaganda. That doesn't have nothing to do with the truth. Because it has maybe something, but a little bit with the truth. The reason why you have such a low success rates and you have competitiveness in this arena is because they want you to be mobilized to learn as much as you can about whatever's in interest here within any of these funding schemes. So they like you to read and learn and understand and try to harmonize your own plans and your own business development and so on, write proposals and build up your skills in such a way so that you will change your behavior in order to finally start acting towards implementation of EU policies, which is the objective of these programs. So it's not an accident that so many people don't get the money and keep on trying. Yet if you do apply those tools, which I'm going to explain to you, then you will start getting the money. And I'll try to explain what I would call shortcuts. So you don't really need to knock on all the doors, but use the adequate tools to be successful. Now compare this. Horizon 2020 is the framework, the key instrument for research and innovation. Yet here we have competitiveness of enterprises and SMEs. Supposedly this is the main instrument, the most important one for the enterprises and SMEs. And just take a look at the difference in the budget. We have barely 2.3 billion compared to 80 billion. So it tells you something. And I have been listening for years about those who are preaching about COSME as very important, very useful and so on. Well, yes, to some extent. For example, those countries who master how to use European Enterprise Network, for example, they can get their business embassies anywhere where it exists and it's financed through COSME. So if you know how to use it. But then again, I've been working with many people employed in the EEN and so on, and I had seen, well, just a few who know how to use it and benefit from it. So we have a lot of wasted money here. And I know that any policy officers and so on will strongly argue with me how this is not the case, and I know that for pretty much all of the EU programs, the policy officer will say, well, no, we don't have any unsuccessful projects. And that's a joke among all the consultants and everyone pretty much who I work with in the last 40 years, that by rule EU doesn't have any unsuccessful projects, right? While in reality you have something like 80% of this money being wasted and have no real impact. Except, of course, an impact which is never neglected, which is accumulation of the capital of the wealth for those who are rich. Now, there's the education, training, youth and sport. The umbrella program, it's called Erasmus Plus, and it has something around 15 billion. That's an interesting one. Very popular. The downside of it is, for example, in Serbia you have a decentralized management, which is dedicated to, for example, to an agency, some foundation, which pretty much does not have anyone who ever written successful Erasmus Plus proposal. So in this management structure you have a concentrated hypocrisy and ignorance and sort of, I always call these intermediaries kind of parasites, because those who are not experts in the field, but yet they are there to promote information and do something, whether they're politically appointed, and most likely they are, and whether it's a family or whoever got them there, is doing a lot of damage for the real participants, for those who are writing and implementing proposals. So this decentralized management here is a downfall, kind of downside of the program itself. For most of these, I'll explain. You have you have three ways of how the programs are implemented. You have either centralized community programs managed by the DGs and the agencies. Then in the global arena, like a global group of programs, you would find EUDs, like delegations, coupled with national authorities managing programs, and we're going to more increasingly decentralized way. And then you have as well the third way, where we have, for example, in those structural, those regional instruments, cohesion instruments, you have regional agencies, in most of the cases, or ministries in charge for management of the program. So it really depends who's managing the program in terms of its transparency, and in terms of whether you're going to get a fair competition, or whether we're going to have clientele kind of approach, and so on and so on. Then you have Employment and Social Innovation Program, which is a rather small one. So ESSI is a rather small one, and then Customs Fiscalis and Anti-Fraud, which are dealing with taxation in terms of customs, taxation in terms of aggressive policies, more and more that countries are using to get the money from you in terms of taxes, anti-fraud in terms of money laundering, blah blah, and Connecting Europe Facility is pretty much the ICT structure connecting. Then Economic, Social and Territorial Cohesion Group of programs. So Youth Employment Initiative, which is kind of top-up allocation, then regional convergence, then transition regions and competitiveness, territorial cooperation, cohesion fund, and you'd find that most of those are reserved. Most of those are reserved for the member states, as well as sustainable growth and natural resources. We have some of the largest, like European Agriculture Guarantee Fund, and then Agriculture Fund for Rural Development with almost 100 billion, which is a major instrument. And then you have European Maritime and Fisheries and Climate Action Cohesion Fund, which is now gaining in significance. Cohesion Fund here, you can't see it clearly, but it's 60-something billion. And then Security and Citizenship, dealing with asylum and migration, internal security, IT systems, justice, right, equality, citizenship, Europe for citizens, stimulating active participation of citizens in the processes of policy making and so on. Food and feed, pretty much security in terms of food and feed. Health, right, I think we are now implementing the third health program. Consumer protection and Creative Europe, again very interesting one, but with a rather small budget, which a program which coupled culture and media, audio-visual and media and creative industries. And then Global Europe. This is a range of instruments available to you for the pre-accession countries. We have IPA 2 right now implemented. And we have European Neighborhood Instrument and European Neighborhood and Partnership Instrument, previous one. Then Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, with a magnificent, impressive budget of 1.3 billion. An Instrument for Stability and Peace with 2.3, Common Foreign Security Policy Partnership Instrument, and Development Cooperation Instrument, DCI, dealing pretty much with poverty issues and so on. This is an important instrument for countries like Africa and so on. And then so on and so on and so on. Now, under each one of those, you have sub-instruments, and then for you to identify what's there for you, you would need to read the work programs and identify the most suitable calls for proposals under each one of those in order to figure out which one is the right for you. And once you have done an in-depth analysis of the call for proposal, you can understand whether your expertise and your interests in some way correlate and match with what EU wants to fund. So whether you could be the one implementing those activities and then get the money for that. As you can see, it's incredibly wide area with a range of different instruments. So you can use these type of tables as a shortcut to figure out which are the instruments for a specific topic. For example, let's say, well, if you're dealing with the culture, then Creative Europe is instrument for you. Or for example, if you're dealing with education and training, then you can pretty much look at Erasmus Plus primarily, and then as well you can take a look a little bit. You can do, of course, with the consumer and customs and fiscalis, particularly in terms of education and training. For there's no need to focus on this one because it's a bit misleading to create this type of tables. These type of tables are typically developed, presented by multinationals like Deloitte, like others, who sell their services and they want to demonstrate how they understand the range of instruments available to you and so on. For those of you who like to find out on your own what are those instruments which can be beneficial for you, I would advise first to start analyzing what had been used in your country and who had been using it. This is pretty much the best way for you to figure out the reality of what you have been doing in your country. So let me show you. Now, if you want to have detailed information about the budget of European Union, as I said, you can go to the website of the European Union. So it's europe.eu and blah 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 blah, and then when you type budget, you're gonna see this page, and here you can see the distribution that I have shown you. And then if you click on, well, let's get this interactive whatever, you're going to have more and more details about the specific issues which I described. But the first site where I recommend you to start is not the budget, it's actually financial transparency system. So financial transparency system is designed as a search tool where, for example, I'm going to type a year here, 2017, and I'm going to type, let's say, Serbia as a candidate country, and let's see how much money EU had spent formally in Serbia. It does not necessarily mean that the money ended up in Serbia. It might have been the case that most of it was spent on the foreign companies and consultants which had essentially used that money to bring it back to their own economies under the umbrella of providing assistance or doing blah blah blah, whatever. Well, essentially advancing their own interests in Serbia. So let's see, country overview for 2017. We have roughly 424 million, and we have 360 recipients. It means the 360 organizations have received money from the EU here. And, 290, but some of them have received several amounts, several times they received money. So first here you have some experts, you have names of the people who are paid as experts. So there's this Bobic, I'm assuming that it's one of the favorite ladies of the EU milieu, of 22,300 and something in fees. And then you have, I don't know, Milkovic and Trbovic, Anna, I'm guessing that it is, formally with 3,000 something. But it does not necessarily mean this is all the money that they have got. You'll find my name as well there on the list. And it's essentially just a portion of the money which at some point I was paid by as an evaluator. But you also get paid through projects, and you also get paid for a variety of different jobs. But what's relevant here are names of projects and participants. And you can export the data here. If you click export, you're going to get a Excel sheet that you can easily surf through, and then you can find names of projects, you can find names of organizations who participated, and people who got the money. As well, with a little bit more advanced skills, you can see exactly who they worked with, meaning that you can map out the entire network that EU had developed in certain areas, whether this is women entrepreneurship, whether this is disability, whether this is energy, the rule of law. So around any topic, corruption, if you go to projects and then you look at the people and look at the partners, you'll find exactly states, national states within the EU, and you find also the names of the people who were proactively involved with the people in Serbia working on those specific issues. Now, let's say that you'd like to develop a proposal for renewable energy. It just came to me as an idea. I'm not saying that there are some who would like to do that, there are some who wouldn't. And then it's unlikely that you are going to get the money if you try to promote a proposal and an idea in a vacuum, if you're not aware of this network around already operating in Serbia that EU had already financed in order to do analysis for their own industry, primarily about who they could possibly sell the renewable energy technology, blah blah blah, and who are the regulators that they influenced, meaning there's always someone who's regulating on taxes, on whatever, what can and cannot be implemented, what are these bureaucratic administrative procedures, how you can get the renewable energy plant, whether it's driven or mobilized by wind or water or whatever else. Typically you'd find that EU had been influencing strongly those who are doing and designing regulations. So you need to know that in order to get into that arena. So that's why this website is particularly useful. And when I start working in any country, like when I worked in Turkey, for example, for more than now, it will be 5 years. So I would type Turkey, and for all of you who will observe this training and who are right now watching this training, who are from Turkey, take a look at the list of the programs that Turkey is using. And also then go to the recipients. You see you have 280 recipients in 2017. Come back to 2016, 2015, 2014. So from the beginning of this cycle until now, you'll find all organizations, all projects. So that's one of the best ways for you to get a better understanding which program you could possibly use for your own interests. And it will tell you very easily. So whether you can use, let's see over your programs. You have COSME program used in Turkey by 17 commitments, meaning that there were people active. Then you have Union Civil Protection Mechanism 1, probably going directly, of course, to the ministry, usually the Ministry of Interior. Then Action Program for the Customs, building up the capacity for customs and customs union, of course, and pretty much focus on training. Then Development Cooperation Instrument, you have 13 commitments there. Then you have Employment and Social Innovation Instrument, an Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, Marine and Maritime and Fisheries, 1 going to the Ministry. Neighborhood Instrument, Union for Program for Education, Training, Youth and Sport. Erasmus was used by 41. There are 41 commitments. Turkey had been active, not nearly as it could in that area in terms of the Erasmus Plus, but yet you see some more progress than in other programs. Let's take a look at the big numbers here. Horizon, apparently there are 105 commitments in 2017, meaning 105 active projects probably, payments for the Horizon participants, and 26 for IPA 2, which is way below that it ought to be, because IPA is a major instrument for accession countries, candidate countries. So apparently there's a huge issue, meaning that between the European delegation and the national authorities in Turkey in terms of IPA programming, apparently then I would say, because I've trained people in Turkey in programming, that the EUD is most likely using political instruments, using bureaucracy and administration to slow down and make more pressure on Turkey through IPA. Otherwise, there will be much more usage of IPA funding, because I've noticed that within the ministry there are quite a few of skillful people. And then, in terms of Horizon, of course, we have an ongoing project. It's funded through IPA. It's called Turkey in Horizon 2020 Phase 2. And I had one of the experts who took part in the Phase 1, most likely I'm as well going to contribute to Phase 2. So we're actively working on networking, on matchmaking, on creating partnership between EU and Turkey for proactive participation, to increase this number of organizations from Turkey taking part in the Horizon program. But anyway, for those of you with a little bit of an analytical mind, and those of you who like to approach what you're doing in life thorough, with some planning and analysis, well, this is where I start. And then the next thing to do is, once you had done analysis for your country and instruments which are available for you, what I would do is I would discover for those instruments that are available to you, I would discover who's in charge. So who's implementing this program. And usually you'd find 3 groups. You will find those structural and cohesion instruments which are managed by regional authorities, ministries, regional development agencies and so on. So they're managed on a national level typically. And by far, those are the less transparent programs. And by rule, in terms of its competitiveness, their competitiveness and so on, they are not nearly as competitive as community instruments. Community instruments are managed by general directorates in the agencies, and they are much more transparent, but yet again then there's more competition. And then you have externally, like group of global instruments where European delegation jointly with national authorities operates those programs. And by far, again, this is where you'll find the most corruption. And again, lack of transparency and quite a lot of hypocrisy, ignorance, and those project and political games played as EUD and EU would like to kind of channel and control states where it operates and with whom it works. So let's briefly recap what's there for you. So we have 5 European structural and investment funds, the big ones. So that's European Regional Development Fund, Social Fund, Cohesion Fund, Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, Maritime and Fisheries Fund. All of them would fit in those structural instruments, all of them managed by the member states, regional agencies and national authorities. You can see quite a lot of topics which are covered by them. There's research, innovation, information, communication technologies, competitiveness of SMEs, low carbon economy, climate change adaptation, social inclusion, environment protection, and so on, vocational education. So if you would go to the website and just click on any of those topics, you can find how, provided that you are from a member state, how to use these funds and who you can address for more information. Again, I always advise my clients to think out of the box. So if you are interested to get the money from these funds and you are not from a member state, well then use a company which is registered in the member state. You can create one or you can just buy part of some. That's fairly normal and easy, and I see that as a very common and usual practice. Then let's go through the external action instruments. Brief overview. So what we have here, we have IPA, we have for the candidate countries with a rather huge budget of 12 billion for all of the candidate countries, meaning that Europe had very, very significantly invested in enlargement, as you can see, and it had a complete breakdown of its enlargement policy, and it has a complete breakdown of its migration policies, and it has crisis right now in each one of the candidate countries. Then you have neighborhood instrument, then you have development cooperation partnership instrument, then instrument contributing stability and peace, instrument for democracy and human rights, and as you can see, European Union is incredibly committed to spreading out democracy and human rights throughout the globe, with its full 1.3 billion euros committed to it. And then Institute for Nuclear Safety and Greenland and Development Fund. IPA, the major one among those who are candidates. So I won't dive right now into IPA, neither into any of those. I'll just emphasize that what we have here in IPA 2, we have this sectoral programming. So you'd need to know a bit more about it by visiting the websites of your EUD delegations and national authorities managing IPA, operational structures managing IPA, in order to figure out what is there. But yet again, available for you in IPA. But yet again, I'll advise you as well to visit, this is Europe Aid website. It's Office for Coordination of those programs which are funded through the budget, to the community budget. So it covers IPA as well. And here, if you open this website and you go to search engine, you go to advanced search, and for example, you can say, you can type in Serbia, or you can type in Turkey, or you can type in Ukraine, or Macedonia, well, whatever. And then you will find out, well, I think we were just out of the screen, but we'll come back, hopefully, in a moment or two. So it says economy, yeah, okay. Is it working? So I don't know why not. Let me see. Can I get this? Okay, I can. Good. Here we're back. So, as I said, for EPA, you can get information on your EUD, European Delegation website, and Operational Structures website. Then, for the Development Cooperation Instrument, you need to type in its name, and again it will lead you to EuropeAid, and you can see how to use it. European Neighborhood Instrument, significant one again. European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, incredibly attractive. It has these 3 layers of how it works. One, a global layer, then regional and national. So I would strongly advise you, those of you who are committed to advancing the rule of law, particularly in the last several years, EU had focused on assisting the most deprived groups. So in terms of torture, in terms of democracy, and so on and so on. So you would need to visit European Instrument in Democracy and Human Rights website in order to find out the exact topics that will be covered in the time span of 2019 and 2020 for you to prepare adequate proposals. Then there are community instruments such as COSME, such as here, if you visit COSME's website, you'll find quite a lot of calls and project models. And then what we have now is, instead of participants portal, we have now a single data exchange interface. They could have made it simpler in terms of its name and in terms of its appearance. So I'm going to demonstrate to you where are you going to find calls for example, for COSME. So you need to go to this website, and then you go to search for funding and tenders. And then the website is going to offer you quite a few of, let's say, you can choose by program. So it says this website supposedly is going to cover Horizon and Third Health Program, Asylum, Migration, Integration Fund, Consumer, Creative, blah 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 blah, Erasmus Plus, Europe for Citizens, and so on and so on. Yet again, because you have just recently realized, after more than 30 years of using these instruments, that participants could benefit from having a single entry interface. So for the last 2 years they've been creating this website, and it's not functional yet, because of course we're dealing with a lot of people employed there who need to have their regular salaries every month. So they have not yet managed to create a website where you can effectively find out information about all the programs. So it's kind of misleading to tell you to go to single electronic data interchange area and find information about all the programs, because they're not there. Yet you can find information about programs that were previously on participants portal, meaning that's Horizon, for example. So you have all the data about Horizon. So I'm going to use Horizon as an example because it is the most significant and the largest funding program on the planet. So if I click on the horizon, you can have keyword search, and you can as well select the program in terms of sub-programs and focus areas and cross-cutting issues. The best way for you to start, of course, just type keyword. But for any program, if you don't want to start this bottom-up search by typing a keyword and looking at what are all the calls which are now open or upcoming. Yes, I see Patrick is asking me, can I provide this for Zambia? Yes, of course. You would just need to go to the financial transparency system and type in Zambia and see all the instruments and all the projects that have been implemented. And later on I'm going to demonstrate that. So let's come back to these two ways of how can you find a call for you. So it's top down, you start from the policy, and then you take a look at, well, what are those instruments that the EU have designed in order to implement policy objectives? Or you go to one of the search portals as this one and type in your keywords and look, well, what are those calls open where this keyword appears? So what are the possible calls for you to take part in? Now, the best and the most thorough way for you to take an overview of all the calls in some program is to look at the work programs. And here I'm going to open work programs for 2018 and 2020. And I'm going to open main work programs, and here are all main work programs for Horizon 2020. For example, let me take number 7, which is one of the most attractive funding scheme on the planet. It covers instrument, it's called SME instrument. So this is how work programs for Horizon look like. It's called Innovation in Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. And here you have all the topics which shall be covered through 2018, 19 and 20. And then you have, 2018 and 20, sorry. And you have INNOSUP, for example, cluster facilitated projects for new industrial value chains. SME Innovation Associate pilot scheme. Blockchain distributed blah blah blah, and so on. And then when you want to take a closer look on what will be financed under that specific call, then you need to focus on the text of the call, which is divided into 3 areas. First, specific challenge. And then we are going to have scope. And then we're going to have expected impact. So usually all of those calls are presented in such a way, so you have these 3 segments, and then you have type of an action, whether it's an innovation action, research innovation action, coordination and support, and so on. It will immediately indicate what type of activities are, eligible and recommended, and in most of the cases obligatory. So how you're going to structure your work breakdown structure and structure your project. So your scope is going to be pretty much a map, and the type of action as well will put the frame on what kind of design you're going to have in terms of the work packages. So this is where I start when I work with the Horizon topics. You need to read the work programs. And I would strongly advise you as well for European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, Creative, any of the programs that I had mentioned, to read these documents, not only because you will deepen your understanding about the expectations of the European Commission, but because you can use words, phrases, sentences as building blocks of your proposal, because you'll be using terminology that the Commission is using and evaluators must understand. It's part, I'll come back to this point when I address the issues of the excellence in proposal writing, how to use this adequate terminology and bridge the gap, the language gap, which is incredibly important if you are not a native English speaker, but even if you are, if you have not spent years working in Brussels and using Brussels English, that is often called by my colleagues who are using British English. They call it, well, this is not English at all. It's a new language they invented. So you do need to master the terminology that the Commission is using in order to be successful. So here you have a presentation of the objectives of each one of the programs that I had mentioned. For example, the sub-programs of Horizon, like dividing these three pillars: excellent science, industrial leadership, societal challenges. Types of actions, as I explained: research, innovation, coordination and support, an SME instrument, and so on, and so on. Now, this is an interesting question, which is, are you interested to analyze and look together with me some project models? I might use those project models that I've been writing and which were successful. And there, through those project models, you could possibly then have a better understanding of what the EU really expects from you in terms of this technical proposal part. That's the best way that I had found, the best way to learn, and it has a very steep learning curve. Once I had the opportunity to read and evaluate and analyze dozens and hundreds of proposals that other people had written, it kind of purified for me a little bit my understanding of the evaluation and success criterions. This is why I think that project models are particularly valuable, and I'm always willing to share them. And majority of people are not, because they would consider that a competitive advantage, blah, 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 and so on and so on. And most of the consultants in this arena are actually kind of fighting, in terms of what kind of tools and these innovations they are bringing in while they're designing their proposals to be more convincing for the evaluators. Now, for those of you who like to have detailed understanding of each one of the programs that I mentioned, I'd be very happy to share with you the presentation that I was using, so you can read it. But ideally, you should not be focusing on the presentation. You should follow the advices which were given, meaning that for each one of those programs, you have two ways of finding the right call. If you're interested in migration, development, poverty, whatever, find the right policy. Then once you have typed in on the central website, once you have typed in that policy name, you will see what instruments are designed by the European Commission to implement those policy objectives. And you can check among those instruments which one are used in your region, area, country at the Financial Transparency website. And you can as well find all the stakeholders, all the people who ever participated and their partners. So you can really get deep into what we would call this EU network in some area of all the people who are working in a certain area who are financed by the EU, and get a deep stakeholder analysis: who's doing what, who's promoting which topics, who's working with whom, and partners, and so on and so on. And the other way for you to find the right call is bottom up. I've demonstrated for you two websites One was this single electronic data interchange, blah blah, where pretty much you can find data about Horizon. Then for each other program listed there, you still need to come back to the original website of the program to find work program, meaning a document that will describe what calls will be published within a time span of a year or two in 2019 and 2020. Those are two ways for you to find the right call. Now, when you are deciding about your role, whether you want to write a proposal, or you want to be a partner, or you possibly want to join in as an expert, for your organization and for those who are decision makers in specific organizations, I always advise to start with this basic set of questions of strategic planning. So you do need to have a bit of understanding of the vision, who we are in terms of our organization. Who do we aspire to be, our raison d'etre? Why do we exist? And what is our purpose? For whom and why? So you do need to have this vision and mission statements clear. And then you come back to scenario planning. And as I explained, EU is currently having very intensive scenario planning exercises. And you do need to do the same for your own organization. Now, if we have, as it's planned, increased level of conflicts, increased level of migrations, increased level of authoritarian and dictatorial rule, diminishing the fundamental basis of democracy. If we are going to have scenarios where elite rule and extract the wealth and resources and so on, and impose control assertively, if you're going to have an increased level of unemployed, and so on and so on, it's going to affect your project, it's going to affect your planning. So then, the third important part of your strategic planning is today. Where are you right now? So what are your strengths? What business are you in? What are you known for? Your reputation, your image, strengths, weaknesses. And what is this gap between where you're right now and where do you want to be in a certain period of time? And that will tell you the new strategic axis, because if you continue doing what you have been doing always, there will be no changes. You're going to just have an increased amount of challenges and issues which will be brought to you, imposed by others. So when you do strategic planning, you do need to think about how this affects where we are today, what's happening around us, and what new ways of work, what new directions we need to take, new products to develop, new people to hire, new ways of working, new strategic axes to take. Ideally, you ought to be finding the ways to merge your role in a project or your project here. So this is your project. Ideally, because it helps you personally and your organizational development. As well, you never must lose from your side those fundamental, those core issues. What must be in place for the strategy to work? So what are your critical objectives? For example, like keeping the sufficient amount of, cash or whatever is necessary for your business to survive, or your team or your research group and so on. So we're not going to have a literal break time because we're not going to have a break. We're going to end our session now. I hope you have enjoyed this second session. I hope that it will help a little bit to put more light on how EU works. Remember the triangle. Remember that all the programs are there not to help you. They're there to help the EU, primarily politicians, achieve what they like to do. And typically politicians are not those people full of integrity and independence. Well, not from my experience. By rule, most of them have been paid, financed to advance interests of corporations or power elite and so on and so on. So instruments which are put in place are there to help them achieve their objectives. It does not necessarily mean that you cannot benefit from them. So you can apply your expertise, knowledge, resources and advance your strategic interests using the EU money. But you do need to understand this philosophy first in order to proceed. Now, I'm also going to use this opportunity to announce briefly what we'll be doing in the next session. So next week, what we'll be doing is, for those of you who'd like to have analysis of project proposals, I'm going to demonstrate to show you different proposals for all the programs. So you can see how they look like, and what are the evaluation criteria, and what are the success factors, what you need to write in specific areas for the SME instrument, for the European Instrument of Democracy and Human Rights, for EPA, for technical assistance proposals, for whatever. I'm very happy to share this with you because I know that pretty much everyone in the EU funding arena will try to keep this hidden and revealed only to clients and charge a lot of money as their own competitive advantage and try to earn on that. So I like to demystify this for you and assist you advance with a strong belief that this will contribute to your own interests and as well that it will contribute to EU's interests from shifting back from this elitist and top-down and assertive and control-oriented to more of a bottom-up and quality-oriented and impact-oriented structure. And we'll be doing the example how, for anyone who'd like, you can write how to find a call. So you can just type in the next session what you like to do, and I'll help you find the right call. And then I'm going to as well help you analyze the call, the critical information, deadlines. I'll help you analyze text. I'll help you create word breakdown structures. And we'll do the exercise and we'll have a lot of practical examples. So we shall continue next Saturday at 19 Brussels time. And until then, I wish you a really pleasant evening. And I don't know, for those of you coming from a variety of different continents, well, pleasant day or night. And I hope this was useful for you. Once again, all the best and cheers.